Hello everyone, my name is Josh and this is Whimsical and Interesting Musings, or WHIMs. And today I'm going to be giving you a review for the 1988 comedy classic Scrooged, starring Bill Murray, Karen Allen, Roy Mitchum and Alfre Woodard. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. But yes, this is a 1988 comedy written by Mitch Glazer and Michael Donoghue and directed by Richard Donner. And this is basically an adaptation of A Christmas Carol written by Charles Dickens. And this, instead of it being set in 18th century London, we are introduced to the character of Frank Cross in modern day, or as of when the film was released, 1988, New York City. And instead of a English accountant or tax collector, we are basically following the exploits of a television executive by the name of Frank Cross for a television studio known as IBC. And IBC is a sort of variety channel which mostly gives you a ton of content, and it's some of the stuff that they offer you is very weird. Like, it's a very weird blend of very darkly comical to kind of a bizarre combination of all these different things. In fact, if anything, this particular channel kind of reminds me of now in our streaming age with the internet and streaming, we tend to have a lot of content, and some of the content that we have on offer is very bizarre. Sometimes the stuff that's on streaming services is very kind of bizarre and very topical, like a Christmas themed film or TV series. Sometimes it's reality TV shows. Sometimes there's pantomime-esque shows or performances with very famous people, very famous British actors or comedians or what have you, playing certain key roles, like Brian Blessed playing Captain Hook in Peter Pan and things like that. So it kind of gives you that flavour of, oh, this is meant to be kind of like a jab at consumerism. And Frank Cross is a really kind of, to put it a little bit bluntly, he's a bit of an arsehole. He is a guy who literally is at the top of his entire empire. He's very successful. He's the type of guy who you just don't say no to. And the way he's introduced like a Bond villain. You see the back of his head the first time when we first see him, and he says, "Show me the Scrooge special." And what happens after that is basically we are shown a nice, very glossy looking variety type show with all sorts of different famous people playing the roles of these very iconic characters in A Christmas Carol. And Frank's reaction is, "Oh my god, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. You've got, America's favourite old fart reading a book in front of a fireplace." And things like that. So to say that he isn't very happy about it is an understatement, because he follows it up with, "Now I have to kill all of you," and things like that. So you really do get the sense with this character that he really just is an arsehole. So he says, well, first of all, you've got to make sure that you get them right away. They have to be scared to miss it. They can't miss this. So he shows them a promo of Scrooge, of A Christmas Carol, which doesn't look like the thing that he's pitching with what it actually is, which is A Christmas Carol. He basically includes stuff like violence, drug use, all sorts of different things in this promo to really kind of get people to watch this thing. And one of his employees, played by Bobcat Goldthwait, says to him, "Sorry about this, sir, but what does that ad have to do with Scrooge?" And Bill Murray's reaction as Frank Cross basically is like, none whatsoever. Why is that? And then he just does this very, very kind of, he goes, "None whatsoever. Why is that?" he kind of like does this rapid blinking thing. And I just really, I love the way Bill Murray does this, because he is an a-hole in this movie, but what's very interesting is he isn't a total asshole. There are moments where he kind of does show a little bit of care and a little bit of heart. But basically, he goes to his assistant Grace, played by Alfre Woodard, and he basically says, Grace, who is that guy? And he goes, she says, oh, he's this person. He did this for you last year, and he's been doing this ever since. And he goes, oh, well, tell him to clear out his desk and cancel his bonus. He's fired. And she goes, fired? But it's Christmas. So you really do get a sense right off the bat that he really just isn't a very nice guy. His brother comes round and he tries to convince him to come round to Christmas dinner, but he refuses because he's got work to do. And there's even a moment where he goes to go and accept an award, but then it kind of ends up that, he's just basically there. He has such a thrill for life. You can just really tell by the way he delivers his speech, his acceptance speech of this award. He goes, I'd like to thank everybody. I give so much to the world. In fact, I've given so much, I literally feel empty inside. And there's even a moment where he literally flicks the gold statue to make sure that it's real gold. And what can I say? Bill Murray plays the likeable arsehole so well. And this is one of the examples where I feel like he does a very good job of really just kind of selling how bad this person is, or how really douchey this guy is, because he is a very terrible person. But he is also a guy who has heart where it matters. But at the same time, I think what really makes his character work is that he's such a douchebag, because that's how you do A Christmas Carol. You've got to make them very almost, irredeemably unlikable, and then you've got to really kind of have that moment where, because the whole entire point of A Christmas Carol is it doesn't matter how bad you are, anyone can be redeemed if they have the right set of circumstances. So to me, that was one of the key reasons why this works, is that he really does sell how bad this guy is. But then he's also kind of a very interesting character, because he gets visited by the first ghost, which is his old business partner, or one of his old idols. And he's basically this rotting corpse who has a golf ball coming out of the side of his head, and various other, sorts of rodents and, bits of vermin, coming out of his suit, or rummaging around in his innards to try to, get to the top of his head, or try to get a way out, or something like that. It's a very dark and very brutal design, but it really kind of gives him the impression that he used to be a golfer, or he used to love playing golf a lot when he was alive. And I thought that was a nice touch. But he basically says to Frank, well, when he first gets introduced, he comes through the door and he says, oh, hi, Frank, I'll just help myself to a drink, I'll help myself to a scotch. And he starts pouring the drink, and Frank gets a gun out of his desk drawer, and he starts firing his gun. But instead of just firing his gun at the guy, he starts making sound effects. Like, he starts going, bam, ba-bam, and things like that. And I thought, that just makes it even funnier, because it's not right that he just basically goes, okay, let's just have him fire the gun, and let that be that. And he drinks the ghost drinks the booze, and then it just pours out of him, out of all the orifices that he shot through. And instead of doing that, he just basically does these weird bam sound effects or whatever. And I just thought that adds so much comedy and so much light to this otherwise quite dark and very grisly situation. But what's very interesting is that Frank is a guy who just doesn't get it. I mean, when he first gets introduced to the first ghost, who is a taxi driver, he takes him to his past, which is 1955, and he basically says, this was your childhood home. And Frank goes, well, I get what this is. You want to take you to my past, present, and future, and throughout the night I'll get, all schmaltzy and start to, feel remorse, what I've done, all these other things. But forget it, pal, you've lost. And the ghost just goes, you might think that, but when Attila the Hun saw his mother, Niagara Falls. He's a great character. And this entire sequence, the past sequence, is actually very interesting, because it basically says that Frank didn't really have much of a childhood. He lives at home with his mum and he watches television. And when his dad or his stepdad comes in and gives him a Christmas present, he gives him a Christmas present in the form of a slab of meat, like a bit of beef or something, like a long round bit of beef. And he goes, "Oh, but I wanted a choo-choo train." And his stepdad just goes, "Well, if you wanted a choo-choo train, why don't you go and get a job?" And yeah, that was quite a grim scene. And the guy who plays the stepdad is actually the boss in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, because I recognise the voice. And I just found that really hilarious that he's basically telling his stepson to basically just go out and get a job because he wanted a choo-choo train. And yeah, that's actually quite grim. But then what follows afterwards is Frank has to... The ghost basically is saying, you spent most of your life watching television and you really haven't lived much of a life. And he goes, "Oh, that's not true. I had a great life. I scored the winning, touchdown at a baseball game. My father was in the audience. He carried me on my shoulder and things like that." And he goes, "That was the kid on the courtship of Eddie's father." And he goes, oh, well, fair enough. Well, we had one Christmas where we were up on a hill and we, I rolled down the hill and we lived in this house on a prairie." And he goes, "Oh, you're so full of crap. That was Little House on the Prairie." And he goes, "Well, that was the holiday special of Little House on the Prairie." And he goes, "Yeah, it was the holiday special of Little House." And then he goes, "Let's face it, Frank, Dungworm's got more out of life than you did." And you laugh at it, but at the same time, you kind of think to yourself, that's actually kind of really sad. Like, this guy really hasn't had that much of a life. It wasn't until, his mum died and his little brother was born that he probably became a little bit more, a little bit more protective and a little bit more responsible. But it really does add a certain layer of sadness. And during these past sequences, we're introduced to Claire, who is played by Karen Allen, who was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. She's been in a lot of stuff, but I remember her as I can't remember her name from. She was in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. But yeah, she was she's a very good actress, and she's very good in this. She really does play this character who is. She really is kind of a perfect foil for Bill Murray in this particular film, because he's basically a goofball. He's very jokey and all these other things, but she can handle his goofiness, and she kind of likes his goofiness. She even calls him Lumpy a lot of the time, like as a little affectionate nickname for him. And I just really love their relationship. Their relationship is one of the things that really works in this film, because it really shows how really kind of much Frank has messed up throughout his life, because he meets Claire, who seems like the answer to his problems, and there's this one night where it's Christmas Eve, and they have to open one gift, and he decides to open one, and it happens to be a copy of the Kama Sutra. And he literally is flicking through the pages, and he's going, "Oh yeah, done that, done that, done that, done that." And he goes, "Oh no, you haven't, how could you do that?" And things like that. So you really do kind of see how much chemistry these two actors have together, and how much these two characters really do work off each other very well. And then it cuts to another scene where he is doing a children's show where he plays a dog, and he has to basically take off this dog outfit and go to Claire, and he goes, "Oh, we're planning this dinner with my friends. We've been planning it for a long time. I'd like for you to come tonight. It's Christmas Eve." And he goes, "Oh, I can't come tonight. My boss has literally, asked me out to dinner to pitch this show idea that he really likes that I've got, and I can't do it. Can't we reschedule until after Christmas?" And he goes, "Oh, we only get to see them once a year. It's a very important time," and things like that. But then he goes, "Oh, well, we'll talk about it tonight. I've got to go and, do this show first." So he puts on his dog outfit, and she just goes, "Goodbye, Lumpy," as he's about to go onto the set. And it's really heartbreaking to watch, because you can see in Karen Allen as Claire's face, that she literally doesn't want to end things with Frank, but she knows she has to, because if she doesn't do it now, when will she? And it's one of those things where you don't want to end things, because you really do feel like you've built up quite a relationship with that person, but you know that if they're not going to give you the time of day, it's probably the best to actually just, let them go. And that's a very sad thing to come to terms with, or try to deal with, when you're in that kind of a relationship. And it really was sad to watch looking at that scene because it shows how much he's lost. And that's one of the things that I really do like about every version of A Christmas Carol, is they always have a version of that scene that really kind of adds new dimensions or new layers to Scrooge's character and what he's able to do. And this is one of the better examples where they've actually done it very well. And I just really love every scene with the two of them in it, because they really do add so much. Like, there's a scene, for example, where he goes to a homeless shelter. He has a bit of a breakdown after he has a dinner meeting where he's seeing all these different hallucinations of different things happening, like an eyeball in the martini glass or in the scotch glass. There's a scene where a guy's on fire. There's a scene where a guy's lighting a baked Alaska or something like that, and he sets himself on fire. There's so many things going on. That entire sequence, honestly, if you watch the film, that entire sequence in the restaurant is very well done, and it really adds a layer of comedy to it. It's very good, and he has a bit of a meltdown, and he ends up in a homeless shelter, and after getting nearly mistaken for a homeless person by one of the volunteers in a very hilarious sequence, he ends up meeting Claire again, who literally is running this homeless shelter. And she wants to catch up with Frank because she hasn't seen him for ages. The last time she saw him was on the set of this Christmas special, this Scrooge Christmas special that's going on. And she wants to catch up, but then all the volunteers are starting to say things like, oh, we haven't got the Christmas dinner sorted, we haven't got the turkey sorted, all the food's gone, the presents aren't, arrived yet, we've got to sort these things out. And she's like going, oh, they should have arrived yesterday and things like that, and I've got to go and take care of this. And she wants to talk to Frank, but she's just saying, just wait a minute, I'm going to go and sort this stuff out, I'm going to take care of this, and then we'll have a talk. And then he just decides to leave, and then he says something that says, don't look back. If you want to save someone, Claire, save yourself. And that ends up, having quite a big effect on her in the grand scheme of things. But it really is a relatable sequence, because when you're very busy, and of course everyone's busy at Christmas, but when you're running a homeless shelter, it really kind of adds certain levels of frustration when you're trying to do this job, but then you also want to catch up with someone who you had a very close relationship with, because she does love him. She really does. You can really tell that she's willing to put a lot on the line just to hear him out. And I think that's something that's really quite wonderful. And the fact that she still calls him Lumpy after all this time, I really love moments like that. The chemistry between these two characters is so well done. These two actors is so well cast. I mean, I literally love the couple of Claire and Frank in this particular film, because that's one of the things that makes it for me, because I think that they're portrayed so well, and these two actors really do a good job of really kind of selling the chemistry of these two characters. And I wouldn't even be surprised if any of it was in the script, because honestly, that they do it so naturally that you kind of think to yourself, I wouldn't be surprised if none of this was in the original script, and they just kind of worked off of each other, and they mostly improvised a lot of the stuff that was happening, because Michael Donoghue was a writer for SNL, and of course with SNL you do often have to do a lot of improvisation with a lot of the sketches sometimes to really get the best comedy out of it. And of course, when Michael Donoghue works with actors like Bill Murray and things like that, you really do have to play the improvisation card a lot of the time, especially when you don't have a script. And when you've got the type of shooting schedule in which this particular film had, you kind of do get the impression that, they probably had to improvise a lot of stuff off the cuff in order to get the reactions and the genuine reactions that you get in the film. And it's just so well done. I think that's one of the best things I really love about it. But one of the other things that I really love about it is Grace Cooley and her family, particularly her son Calvin, who is a mute. He had a incident when he was younger, a very traumatic incident where he saw his father killed years ago, and he hasn't spoken since. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't, absorb things, and he doesn't observe things, and he doesn't take stuff in, because he does. The fact that he's witnessed the very tragic death of his father really goes to show that he has absorbed things, and of course him absorbing that information has stayed with him enough to the point where he can't speak, he can't say a word. So what I think really works about this particular version, because he basically is a conduit for the Tiny Tim archetype, but he isn't just an archetype. He does feel like a character who could very easily exist, even if this wasn't just, another retelling of A Christmas Carol. Because the way Grace interacts with her son in this film really goes to show that she really respects her child, and she knows that her son's still in there. He's physically there, but his voice is gone. She knows he's in there. She knows that he can absorb things in and can take things in. Otherwise, he would have been, he would have been institutionalized, as we later find out in the future. So to me, I really like the scenes where she talks to him and she says, "Oh, I've got to go home now. I'm sorry I didn't get you that gift, today, but money's been very tight. My boss has been really, tough on us at work, but maybe next year, okay? Or maybe we'll do something this year that, helps us out," and things like that. So to me, those moments really mattered, and I feel like it didn't just feel like, oh, we're just going to have a scene where he's watching one of the Christmas carols, or he's reading the book and he sees the scene with Tiny Tim and he just kind of takes that in, because that would have been enough. That would have been enough just to have that scene. But the fact that they went that extra mile to have scenes where he literally, where Grace talks to her son and she actually has moments where she's saying, "Oh, sorry I didn't get you this thing this year. Money's been really tight. My boss has been really tough on us at work," and things like that. Stuff to that effect. It really shows that the writers really took it that extra step further. They really wanted this to feel real. This felt real, because it can feel very film or very Hollywoody when you have, these characters. Like it would have been very easy for Grace to kind of have these moments where, "Oh, maybe I should ask my boss for a bonus. What do you think?" And then it cuts to the kid's reaction and he just kind of goes, and then she just goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot you can't talk," or something like that. Like, "Why am I asking you? You can't talk," or something like that. It would have been very easy to have that stuff, like have these little moments of comedy in there, but they didn't. They took those scenes kind of a little bit more seriously than they ever would have, and I think that's something that really is quite special about this film, is they really know when to let the story be told and when to let Frank go and just have fun and enjoy his performance. But there are moments of genuine vulnerability. There are moments of humour, like, say, for example, when he meets the ghost of Christmas Present, and she's played by Carol Kane, who I know as the grandmother from the Addams Family Values film. She's brilliant, but the fact that she plays this very light-hearted, almost, Sugar Plum Fairy type character who, floats on twinkle toes and has this very high-pitched voice like, "Oh, hello, Frank, I'm the ghost of Christmas Present," kind of thing. And she actually really does add a lot of humour. Like, there's a lot of great moments, but don't be fooled by the sweet, cute, cuddly voice, because honestly, as soon as she comes near him, she punches him in the face, kicks him in the groin, and then she slaps him, but she slaps him with the underside of her palm, so it's not even like a proper slap. It's like, she's pushed his face, but she's done it with such force it's literally knocked his face to the side. There's so many great moments of slapstick. She even hits him with a toaster at one point on the chin. So there's a lot of great moments. And yeah, she's a great character. She's a lot of fun. But yeah, that's when he finds out about, Calvin and his, mutism, and how if he doesn't change, he might get institutionalized or worse. So that was actually a very sad moment, and that's usually the moment in a lot of Christmas Carol Christmas Carol stories where Scrooge starts to develop a bit of an epiphany. But I think when he actually is starting to change throughout the course of the production of this other Christmas Carol story in the present hour, where you can actually tell he's starting to change as a person. He doesn't feel like he doesn't feel very comfortable with this entire production. He doesn't feel very comfortable with where he is at this particular moment in time, and I think that really adds so much to the character, that you see that progression between him, just being the boss, very hard-nosed, very hard-pressed, to being a guy who's literally confused, terrified of his own surroundings, and literally on the verge of having that sacred epiphany, which is usually at the end of the entire story when the Ghost of Christmas Future comes up. So with the final ghost, they have a running they have a joke at one point where, you know, he goes back upstairs to his apartment using the lift, and he ends up running into a cloaked figure, and Frank starts to scream a very high-pitched scream. He's like, say, "Oh, it's the ghost, it's come for me," and things like that. And they just say, "Oh, just go on to set, you," and things. They just shove that guy in the cloak away. And he goes, "Oh, you're scaring Frank. Go on a set now, you. Go on." Things like that. And Grace just goes, "Oh, that guy is part of the show, Frank. He plays the Ghost of Christmas Future." He goes, "Oh, that's very good. That's a very good costume. Congratulations to the costume department." And yeah, when he actually meets the Ghost of Christmas Present, he opens up his cloak and he sees that there are these souls. They're not even humanoid at first. When you look at them very closely, they look like they're just souls that are trapped within his rib cage. But then they actually have voices because they sing the song "Put a Little Love in Your Heart" at the end of the film. And that was just very weird. But yeah, I like the idea that when he opens up his cloak, he's just basically got a ton of souls or a ton of people in his ribcage, because that's a little bit of a nod to the Ghost of Christmas Present's final sequence, which is the boy Ignorance and the girl Want. And that's what I think is very fascinating about the entire thing, is they give little nods to the original book, and they don't necessarily just say that, oh, we're just basically going to tell a story verbatim, but with a few jokes here and there. They actually really do take a lot of aspects of it seriously, like the little things they do. And I think that's something that I really love about this adaptation, is they really do take the idea of adapting this story seriously, and it isn't just simply like, oh, we're going to do a modern retelling of A Christmas Carol. And yeah, he has the epiphany, and this is probably one of the moments where I feel like it really sold. There's three things that really sells this film for me. One of which is the relationship between Claire and Frank. That's one. The storyline with Calvin, Grace, and his and their family, the Coolies, and Bill Murray's performance. Not necessarily his comedic chops, even though his comedic chops are pretty much in abundance here. But in his dramatic moments, he really does sell the gradual change of this character, especially when it comes to the scene where he's seeing his own funeral, and he literally sees his brother. He's literally destroyed, torn to pieces, and he sees his coffin go into the furnace, about to be burned and cremated, essentially. And he literally has a reaction that is literally like, I'm sure a lot of us would have that reaction if we saw ourselves being buried or cremated or something like that. So to me, I think that's something that speaks to all of us if we were to see that. But it's very well done, and I really do like Bill Murray's performance. I like his voice when he says, "Don't let them burn me." Like I love that very, you know, gradual sense of being uncomfortable, being very, you know, on the brink of tears almost. It really adds a new level of drama to this scene. But they take it a step further and have him literally cut to him being in the coffin and him, you know, knocking on the lid, trying to get out, which adds another layer of, you know, nightmare fuel to the whole entire situation. Like, imagine being in that situation where you feel like you're being burned alive. It reminds me of a scene in the recent Dracula adaptation, written by Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, where there's a scene where Lucy, having been bitten by Dracula and been drained to the point of death, she's undergone her vampirism, and she is literally in her coffin. But she's still alive, and she's alive in her coffin. The service is happening as usual, and just as she's being played out, and just as the coffin's going into the little slot where the furnace is to be cremated, she's literally screaming and she's knocking on the coffin lid and all these other things. Like, she literally is still alive. She's a vampire and she's still alive, and she's screaming, and all the while the song "I'm Loving Angels Instead" by Robbie Williams is playing in the background. And I thought, yep, I'm never going to be thinking of that song the same way That was one of the moments that genuinely shocked me, and I think it's very similar to in that effect to this, where it really kind of plays on the idea of you being kind of locked in a coffin or in this very claustrophobic space. It really kind of plays to, so if you have claustrophobia, it really does kind of build on that. But I will be that's actually given me the idea to do a review for that new Dracula series. I honestly will recommend it because it is a really good one, and I'd love to, do a review of that one someday. But yeah, I really did enjoy it. I thought it was fantastic. Every single one of those episodes had something good in it. Even though a lot of people say, oh, it's okay for the first two, but then, when the third one happens, it kind of just falls off the rails. I personally liked all three episodes. I'm going to be in the minority here. I actually really like all three episodes of that series. But yeah, I do think there's a lot to offer. I will eventually do a review of that one day. But let's get back to Scrooged. He has his great big epiphany, but instead of him, just going out and addressing the world and hugging everybody, he has to deal with Bobcat Goldthwait, who has, since we last saw him, he's gone completely crazy. He looks very dishevelled, he looks very dirty, he's carrying a shotgun, and he's trying to basically shoot and kill Frank. But he's trying to go through this whilst also trying to deal with the Ghost of Christmas Future. So he really does have a lot of stuff on his plate, and he has had quite the day. But Bobcat Goldthwait's character literally just doesn't care. He literally just wants him to know that, you ruined my life, and I want you to know that you ruined my life and you've done terrible things. So when he has that epiphany and he manages to convince Bobcat Goldthwait's character not to kill him, he ends up, forcing the entire production to basically focus the cameras all on Frank. And he basically says, what are you doing on Christmas Eve watching television? You should go out, see family, help the homeless, go to your local homeless shelter, spend time with the people that you love, and, enjoy life. And it's just such a wonderful message because, again, Bill Murray's performance in this is just really wonderful. It would have been okay if he just did the goofy, douchebag character archetype of Scrooge, but he literally runs the gambit. He literally showcases that he can act and he can literally, sell this transition that Scrooge goes throughout the course of this particular evening. So it really does give you that sense of he really does put his all into it. And that entire speech where he basically just realizes with every single utterance of his voice, he is showing how much of a fool he was and how much of a misjudgment and a miscalculation he had on Christmas, and how it basically, is basically a vehicle for commercialism and all these other things. He literally has this idea, he literally, has this realization that, it is about helping people that you love, being with people that you love, and helping people during a time when lots of people don't have anybody. They barely have, enough room to sleep and eat and, do all sorts of other things. So to me, he really sells that, and he really kind of sells the joy that this character feels at that particular moment in time. And I think this adaptation's fantastic, from the relationship between Claire and Frank to Calvin, how they dealt with the Tiny Tim archetypal character, Calvin, and how they, just did the ghosts. And I do want to also talk about the score by Danny Elfman, who's very famous for doing the scores for a lot of Tim Burton's films. I definitely do feel a very Christmassy vibe to this particular score. In fact, whenever it's around Christmas time, I always think of Christmas when Michael Bublé is playing. And I always think of Christmas when I'm watching something like Elf, or listening to a Danny Elfman score, and that's usually when when I think of Christmas, because it just gives you that very kind of fun, very kind of almost, it gives you a very haunting feel as well. I love the jingle bells with the very creepy children's choir kind of thing. I really like that touch. That's very signature Danny Elfman, and I just love every minute of this particular film. It's fantastic. It's funny. It has heart. It's a little dark in some places, but I think if you can get past the dark stuff and enjoy the comedy, I really do think that this is a festive favourite, especially for me, because I do feel like it's a great inclusion. It's a great adaptation to A Christmas Carol, and just to round things off with this whole entire video, I do want to give a special shout out to to A Christmas Carol, the various different adaptations I've seen over the years, because I literally am one of those people. My brother-in-law said to me once, "What's your favourite version of A Christmas Carol?" And I literally said, after giving it much thought, I said to him, I don't think I have a definitive version of the story, because it's such a good story anyway, that it's very hard to do a bad version of it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the comments who will tell me that there's a ton of bad versions of A Christmas Carol, but I personally think there's no bad version, because every version has their own things to admire about it. For me, my favourite aspects of A Christmas Carol is usually I usually like the Muppets Christmas Carol. I like the 2009 Jim Carrey adaptation of A Christmas Carol. I like Scrooged. I like the Alistair Sim version. I like the Albert Finney 1970s Scrooge version with all the songs. I like that version. There's so many that I absolutely just adore, and I'll happily watch them every year, at least one or two of them every year. And I think that's the incredible thing about this entire adaptation process, is there's no bad version of the story out there that I've seen thus far. My favourite version, one of my favourite versions, is when they, in the 2009 version, where Scrooge is visiting the Cratchits and he's with the Ghost of Christmas Future, and he's on the stairs and he's literally looking at this family who are grieving over the loss of their Tiny Tim, and it really is a sad moment, and he's seeing the heartbreak in every single member of the family's voices. He's hearing it, but then there's a moment where Bob starts to cry, but then he's trying to put on a brave face for his children, and they're trying to tell him not to cry, it's going to be okay, we're trying to cry, and he's going, oh, I'm all right, love, and he just goes upstairs, and he has his back to his family, and he's going upstairs, and he stops right where Scrooge is sitting, and he lifts up his face, and Scrooge is looking into his face, and he just sees that the man is destroyed. There is literal grief in this man's eyes, and it's such a heartbreaking moment, but it's so beautifully done, and it really shows that, because when you see other adaptations, just the fact that he's seen Tiny Tim, he's seen how much of a bright star in these people's lives he was, and seeing how much his death affected them, should be enough. And in every version, every director has said, okay, that's enough, we don't need to see anymore. But the fact that Robert Zemeckis went that extra mile and said, we're going to have a scene where he literally has to look into his face and see the grief in the man's eyes, that was a brilliant decision, and it shows that there's no definitively bad version of this story, because they've always had something that really kind of adds so much to either the character, adds so much depth to a scene, or something like that. And I really do like the fact that every person who's tackled this has always tried to do it in a different way, and always tried to give us something special with each and every single new version. So I don't think there's a bad version of this story as yet, but I could very easily jinx it, and there could be another version that people say, oh, this is the bad version. But as yet, I have yet to see a bad version of this story, and I definitely do think that Scrooged is one of the definitive ones for me. I do feel like it's one of the ones that I think a lot of people should see, especially if you're up for a good laugh with Bill Murray and seeing his comedy talents become apparent in this particular version. It's very nice to see in that respect. There's also a great cast, and the writing's fantastic. The jabs at variety shows and television networks trying to tell you things, and all these different bits of content. There's so much good stuff here, and I really do feel like it's worth watching just for that alone. But there's so many other good aspects of it, and I think all these other adaptations deserve a lot of respect and a lot of attention as well. So if you can, I'd definitely recommend including this as part of your Christmas movie watching library. It is a really funny movie. It's got a great performance, and everything about it's just so good. And of course, it's directed by Richard Donner, who did great films like the first two Superman films with Christopher Reeves, and he did The Omen, I think, as well, the original 1976 The Omen. And yeah, he's a fantastic director, and he does a tremendous job with this story. And yeah, this is a fantastic film. I've definitely given it a 5 out of 5 stars. So this has been me, Josh, with Whimsical and Interesting Musings. And in the comments, what's your favourite version of A Christmas Carol? Please let me know in the comments below, and I hope you're all having a very good day. And this has been Josh with Whimsical and Interesting Musings. Bye-bye for now.